Another thing that we're playing with tradable permits is an example. I'll give an example of the South Nation water quality trading system in a second, but there's other examples of tradable permits. For instance, greenhouse gas offsets. The province of Alberta has got a kind of cap and trade system for where they've capped the limited, put a regulatory limit on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that the large companies can put out. But one of the options for the companies is to buy offsets from farmers, or it could be other suppliers as well. So that if the farmer adopts a no-till agriculture, or caps a manure tank and collects the methane, or does other things to reduce the emissions from the farm, then they can get so many dollars per ton of CO2, as long as it's done within a kind of a measurable protocol, and then sell those credits to another company that's required to reduce emissions. Is another example. These things they're efficient and equitable. I mean, they treat everybody pretty much the same way. There are some disadvantages in that they need a fairly, essentially you need the government or some kind of regulator to come in and set some kind of a cap, and that takes a long time. It takes a kind of a consensus among all the players or among society that something has to be capped before you can start talking about trading something. Unless you have a kind of constraint, and they're kind of administratively a little burdensome to set up, but they are quite promising. And an example of that is the South Nation River. It's in eastern Ontario, just west of where we are here now. So there's Ottawa River. I guess that's the Rita River, St. Lawrence River, Cornwall. Big watershed. Way too much phosphorus, above provincial guidelines. There was a consensus in the area arrived at that they would try a trading system in the area. So what they did was the Ministry of Environment put in a rule that no new facility could be built in the watershed that would emit any phosphorus. Zero tolerance for any kind of new phosphorus, which effectively capped any kind of residential development. You could not put in a new house that would have a water treatment plant, or the housing development that would have extra water treatment, because the sewage would involve extra phosphorus. But you could put it in if you went and got somebody else to reduce their phosphorus. And they used what they call a trading ratio of 3 to 1, where you had to reduce phosphorus by 3 kilograms. I think it was 5 kilograms. For every 5 kilograms you took out upstream, basically by changing farm practices, you could add another kilogram downstream at the water treatment plant, and so it's been in operation for almost 10 years, and they've seen some increase in water quality, anecdotally anyway, by this kind of a trading thing, where they allow a little more urban development, a little more phosphorus goes out to the sewage, but the funds that are collected go and get producers to put in manure storage systems and buffer strips and a variety of other things that reduce the phosphorus upstream. And so it's a lot cheaper than trying to take out, it's very, very expensive to take out absolutely every molecule of phosphorus from municipal sewage. Anyways, so that's an example of really, now it's in operation in Eastern Ontario. There are some other examples in the United States and some other places where these things work. We're looking to try to see if we can get these kinds of systems adopted in other places. But they do require a kind of consensus among the community that this is the way to go, and that that's a fair way to distribute the costs of reducing the phosphorus level. So. Tax incentives are another thing that we're looking at. People love to save taxes, so that if you can offer a tax incentive, currently we have systems where you're not always charged, or you get a rebate on your property tax for certain areas of land that are not being like riparian areas set aside, or areas that you're not using, forested areas. There are ways of giving incentives to people through the tax system. It doesn't always work, because then you have to be paying tax to save tax, and some people, for various reasons, they aren't paying taxes, they aren't paying a lot of tax, so that doesn't, you can't target them that way. So, and environmental certification, that's the kind of green labeling. There are a lot of companies that are kind of interested in this, and then more and more so we've seen, Walmart and Loblaws and McCain's and a variety of others who are sort of trying to get interested in trying to get a consumer premium for their product by ensuring that the inputs, potatoes or whatever, that went into it were produced in an environmentally sustainable way. It's another way to kind of connect what consumers want in the environment as well as in their French fries with what's going on the land. So that's another thing that we're doing some research on. That's just a bit of a summary of where we see maybe some of these tools being sort of put in place. The market's sort of taking care of the food and the fiber and getting farmers to produce the commodities, but to get things to like greenhouse gas reductions, we're looking at maybe offset systems or certification systems to get farmers to adopt greenhouse gas reducing practices. Down, for instance, at the wildlife habitat to end, conservation easements and auctions and tax credits are things that seem to have a lot of potential in terms of getting particular practices like buffers and wetland restoration to put in place. A lot of what we're trying to do with these policies is to connect farm practices with the ecological services that people want through trying to get the right kind of policy link in there. So just a quick few summary things. Focusing on local place-based solutions is one thing we find is very important. Things just vary so much from place to place that doing big national or even provincial initiatives doesn't seem to be all that efficient. The examples, I guess, the bottom graph shows where the risk from phosphorus is high and low in the country. The green areas is fairly low, but there are some hot spots in Ontario and Quebec and actually around Lake Winnipeg where the risk is fairly high. So if you're going to do a phosphorus program, you do it in those areas, but you don't really have to worry about it in other places. The same thing is that the costs of doing things vary enormously from place to place. That top graph shows 3 different practices: grass buffers, wooded buffers, and cover crops in terms of how much they cost per kilogram of phosphorus to take phosphorus out. And the right hand, the blue bars, are sort of eastern wet areas in Ontario and Quebec, and the left hand bar is the prairie areas, and the costs are just wildly different. Something can be very efficient in one place and really silly somewhere else. So you don't want to go and subsidize just a certain practice because it's probably good in one place and just silly somewhere else. So you have to adapt things to local conditions. Using the right policy tool, again, some of these things like we did that cost-benefit analysis I was talking about earlier, looked at sort of, if we set a target, environmental target, and use different policy tools to get to it, how much would it cost? And we found that the annual payments and one-time payments were far more expensive, and that the auctions and tradable permits were half or less of the cost for that kind of thing. So that if you different policies can cost you differently different amounts. The other thing, we think that there's a very important thing to get non-agricultural parties involved in this kind of stuff, and actually that's part of why it's important for this kind of group for us to connect with non-agricultural groups, because when you're on a landscape in a watershed in a local area, there's a lot more than agriculture going on. There's recreational activities, there's wood lots, there's golf courses, there's all municipal development. Having everybody, if you're going to target habitat levels or water quality in an area, you're going to get all the stakeholders involved. It's difficult because it involves all different levels of government and different departments and conservation groups and all that. It gets kind of complicated, but we think it's kind of essential to move on that rather than just staying within our own department.